Hello leaders, my name is Jason Graziani. Welcome to our channel, Leader for Life. Today I'm excited for the final part of our financial series, and this final installment is going to be talking about smart statements, meaning from an agent perspective, if there are certain areas when you're getting started in business and you have to interact with a customer. And by the way, to the customers and to the clients, you may like to hear this part as well, because if anybody likes to sound a little bit smarter when it comes to financial services, I made a list here of 10 items that are very quick to learn, but could add a lot of value to your overall repertoire when you're speaking. And remember, if you're choosing to be a leader for life, part of this has to do with how you treat financial services for yourself as a consumer. And then also when financial matters get addressed, you may not like numbers, you may not like money, but you should at least know some basics. And I want to provide some value here on the basics. Now, before I do that, I want to give you guys 3 disclosures as I put my coffee down, okay? Number 1, suitability. I'm not recommending a product or service to you as I do not know your financial situation. 2, compliance. Anybody that speaks about this material in the industry should be licensed in the state that they do business in. And number 3, the entire purpose for this series is to empower you. Yes, to empower you to make the best decisions for yourself financially. And this last installment is just going to kind of add a little bit of icing to your cake to make sure that you sound a little bit better when you talk about financial services. Final disclosure, I am not a legal or a tax professional. If you need legal or tax advice, go see an attorney or a tax advisor. Today we're going to be talking about smart statements as it pertains to financial services. Let's start with number 1, markets, indexes. You hear Dow Jones, S&P 500. Regardless of who you are, you've probably heard those before. And I just want to simplify it. Dow Jones represents 30 components. When I mean 30 components, it means 30 different companies represents the Dow Jones. And most of the time when people say the market, referencing our stock market, they're either referencing the Dow Jones, which is 30 companies, or the S&P Standard & Poor's 500, which is 500 companies. And so just so that you kind of have a little bit of an idea, Dow Jones 30 companies, S&P 500. Now, if you see Euro Stocks 50, this is Europe's index. If you see Hang Seng, that's China's index. Nikkei out of Japan. And so there's many different world indices. You do not need to be experts on any of these. Dow Jones and S&P 500 is the one that you're going to come across the most. Number 2, Morningstar.com. If you're a representative at Morningstar, I'm giving you love here. For the last decade and a half, I've used this website, Morningstar.com. Anytime a client gave me a statement and it had mutual funds or other types of investments, if I ever needed to look up the actual mutual fund, in parentheses, with most mutual funds, there will be a 5 or 6 digit code and it'll be letters. Now, this one here, full disclosure, is just an example. I made it up. It's Leader for Life, Jason Graziani, and it's actually my brother's initials as well, but I wanted to give a simple example. It is not a real mutual fund. This is just a fake fund right here. I am not soliciting this for any compliance auditors watching. It will have 5 digits, 5 letters that doesn't really make any sense, but if you go to Morningstar.com, take those 5 letters, type it into the top of the quote box and push enter. It'll give you a full report of the fees and everything else that you want to know about that statement. That way, if you're a customer, you have a statement, your advisor's not getting back to you, most of them don't, and you kind of want to figure some things out yourself, Morningstar.com is a great place to go to. Number 3, IRA and 401k contribution limits. Now, each year, depending on when you're watching this, the different IRS presidents, different rules change. You have to always check in the current year. This is something simple that you could Google, but it's important to understand that each year, and based off of your age, there are contribution limits, meaning the IRS will not let you put in more than a certain amount of money and still qualify for a deduction. So always pay attention to what those limits are, because most Americans save in some type of 401k or IRA equivalent. Make sure you know the limits. Number 4, fixed versus variable insurance products. Now, I have found in my experience that if there's a salesperson that's on the variable side, meaning they focus on variable products, which you need securities licenses to sell, that they're usually an expert on those products. And they have, let's just say, less than nice things to say about fixed products. Also, opposite, I have talked to individuals in the fixed world, and they will say, well, fixed products are better and the variable products are this, this. And this is a world of sales, and I totally understand it. And I would rather make a transaction or sit down with a customer and help them and not use fear as much or negativity as much, rather than an understanding, and let them choose what's best for them. You'll sometimes hear people that will say things about the opposite types of products based off the ones that their company sells, and they really don't know what they're talking about many times, because there is a place for many different product lines that are out there. Now, variable products offer a higher selection of investment returns and different funds that you could choose from with higher fees. And so you just have to decide. Many of the fixed products, they have less choices, lower fees, and you're just gonna have to decide what's best for you, because at the end of the day, it's all about the consumer and what's best for a customer, not what's best for the agent anyways. Political gridlock. This one's really important. Some people love to talk about politics, some people don't. That's not the point for this example. The point for this example is this. The stock market typically, and again, there's no set rule, typically likes political gridlock. Meaning what? Whenever there's one party that's in power and that they could pass any laws and do whatever they want and they could move quickly, and I'm referencing the executive branch with the president, the congressional side, as well as the Senate as well, the Senate and the House. If one party controls all of these components, then what ends up happening is they could pass laws quickly. Many times investors do not like that, because regulation can be passed that could slow down their investment or change their investment, so they're less likely to put their dollars in. However, like recently in the United States, there's a lot of gridlock, a lot of Republicans and Democrats fighting back and forth, and guess what happens? Stock market enjoys political gridlock, because if less is done in Washington, more is left to the private sector and the investors. And so this is just something to know in the back of your mind. You could casually add a statement to a coffee conversation, such as, yes, and obviously with what's going on with the political gridlock, I think the markets are liking that right now. And this is just, again, I'm trying to get you to practice saying some of these statements and adding smart statements to casual dialogue as it pertains to financial services. Over here on number 6, captive and non-captive. What I'm referencing here is more the model, okay? The model, the industry model. So for example, banks, okay? Insurance companies, like you work at an insurance company. Independent, meaning you don't work for a company, but you sell a lot of different companies' products. Maybe real estate. When I say real estate, I'm referencing sales manager, where you have a broker and you have agents, okay? And then you get into recruiting models with network marketing and direct sales, and you're able to build big teams. These types of models that exist, it's important to understand. Sometimes, if you're a newer agent and you're sitting down with a customer and you're explaining a product or service, you'll have another agent that'll say something, maybe it's a friend or a family member, and they'll say something negative to your customer. And then your customer calls you and says, well, you know, I just kind of don't want to have cold feet, or I know, but you almost hear a different version of the customer a day or two later than the person that you had just spoken to. And you know what happens? Many times there's agents that come from a company that only sell a particular product, and they're taught how to talk really well about their product and how to create doubt, fear in other products. And I understand that that's human nature, that's sales, it's people trying to engage and interact and transact with people, but I want you to understand something. Make sure to pay attention to the incentives of the person that's talking to you. For example, if there's a person that only represents company A, and that's the only product they sell, that doesn't mean company A is bad, and it doesn't mean the product is bad. However, if that's the only one that they're talking about, it's probably because it's the only one they sell, which means if they can't sell many different products and services, be very hesitant to listen to the advice and make sure to understand, how is the agent I'm speaking to being compensated? And you should ask them. Ask the agent, how are you paid? Which companies do you market for? Which companies are you appointed with to sell? That's a very important question when you're in this industry, and this could add some value for you. Historical returns. Again, you don't need to be an expert on market. You don't even need to memorize a lot. And this is a simple little graph here that I wrote, and I'll explain it because I know it's written small on your screen. From 1991 to 1999, we call that the dot-com era. okay? And there are many factors that go into growth, but from 91 to 99, the market grew, all right? From 2000 to 2002, there was 3 straight years, 2000, 01, and 02, where the stock market lost. Some call that the 9/11 period of time, and that was a terrible time in America's history, but also it's because of the bubble of the dot-coms bursting, and they call that the bubble bursting. And the market lost for 3 straight years. Then, from 2003 to 2007, the market rose again. There was a real estate boom, and they made interest rates really low, and everybody was buying a house. That all fell apart, and you've probably read that or studied that in history, in 2008, which was a negative, I believe, 37% year, which was terrible for the market, and a third of the market was wiped out, and it was just a really bad time. But then from 2009 all the way to 2017, every single year was a growth. But 2018 was a small loss, and 2019 and 2020 so far has been growth years. Now, we'll see what ends up happening in the future, but sometimes just knowing these periods of time, and if you want to go back farther in history, you can. But when I got started selling financial services, I was in my young 20s. Most of my customers were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. How could I provide these people value if I don't know about the world that they grew up in? And so I needed to read a little bit about the past. And although I've never became an expert on past returns, and I wasn't living prior to 1982, I'm 38 years old, I just want you to understand something, that knowing the basics of what was going on from World War II and Vietnam and all the way up kind of adds some intelligence to your conversation when you're speaking to people. Majority versus the few. Middle class versus wealthy. Very important to understand. The average person that's listening to this video represents the average of America. Let's face it, there's fewer wealthier people and a lot of middle class and lower middle class and upper middle class people. Something very important to understand is this. If you listen to people that's also middle class about money, you'll typically stay middle class. If you want to grow your money game, you got to listen to people that have achieved a little bit better financial success. I've often said when I train my agents, if you know marriage, teach me marriage. If you know parenting, teach me parenting. But if you don't know money, don't give me advice about money. It's okay if you don't know about it, but talk to somebody that knows about it. And you know what I found? That the majority of people use debt first. Debt is home loans, car loans, everything's debt, 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 debt. In the United States, we are a consumer-based society. Then there's a little bit of savings, and then finally there's very little insurance up at the top. So when anything happens, a death, a disability, or something bad happens, boom, middle-class families are wiped out financially. However, wealthier people, they make a baseline, they create a foundation based off of insurance products, then save some money, and then they use debt up on top whenever it's appropriate for them. And that's one of the concepts that we have to try to take that from the wealthy and transfer it down to middle class families. Instead of arguing about who the president is, I know we all have our own views, but what's really important is that we educate families and we teach them to implement what we educate. Teaching people is not enough. You also have to implement the saving strategies so that they save money on a monthly basis and that they get ahead financially. The rule of 72. The rule of 72 states if you take the number 72 and you divide it by the interest rate that you're getting on your money, the answer you get is the number of years it takes your money to double. For example, if you take 72 and you divide it by 7.2%, the answer you get is 10, which means if you earn 7.2% in the market, your money will double in 10 years. If you earn 3.6% on your money. Now, 3.6 is not considered a good return. The reason I'm giving you that is because let's just say inflation, which is typically said to grow at 3 to 4% annually. Let's just say that you grew inflation by 3.6. That means it'll take 20 years for everything around you to double in cost. The price of gas, the price of housing, the price of everything will double in cost. Now, another way of looking at it is if you had $10,000 in your pocket right now, that'd be great. But if you had $10,000 in your pocket right now and you did nothing, in 20 years, it'll be worth $5,000 because the same $10,000 could only purchase half of the goods that are out there. That's called inflation. So going back to the returns, I like to quote, I use 20 years as an example of a 30-year-old having $10,000. And then when they're 50, that $10,000 being worth $5,000. Or a 30-year-old spending $20,000 on a car, that car in 20 years will probably be $40,000. So I think you get my point. The rule of 72 is a simple way of talking about how long it takes your money to double. Finally, how insurance companies make money. The last part here before we wrap up. Insurance companies and all investment firms for that matter make money one of two ways. They either charge fees, which is something standard. You get a service, they charge you a fee, everybody is happy, or something called a surrender period, which is the time value of money. Sometimes you'll hear a salesperson say there's no fees on this policy. And sometimes clients are like, what's the catch? How could there be no fees? Doesn't make any sense. And sometimes the client doesn't move forward because it sounds too good to be true, when in reality, here's how they're making the money. There are no fees on some of these products, but you're telling the insurance company that you will leave the majority of your money there for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 12 years. And the time value of money, or surrender period, meaning the rate at which you're going to surrender the money, means accessing the money. The insurance company keep your money longer, and that's how they make money. And so sometimes when you hear different things, those fees are really high, or there's time value. One thing I want you to understand, insurance companies and investment firms will always make money. They will always make money. But if you choose the product that's best for you, you will make money as well. And that's the entire point. And so as we wrap up here on this video, you guys, I hope that this content we just covered right here helps you to make smart statements. Whether you're an agent that's learning to speak with a consumer, or you're a consumer that just wants to be able to speak a little bit more intelligently on this subject, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, Leader for Life. This wraps up our 10th installment of our financial series. We're about to launch a new series that I'm going to hold off as a surprise for you as we wrap up the year. Got some really good stuff in store for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the content, and finally, give us a comment. Let us know if you want us to train on this, if you want us to prepare this material, or if you just want to give us feedback. We're open to listen. We're open to learn, because the entire outcome is about you making a decision to choose to be a leader for life. You guys take care and God bless. Bye-bye. I'm excited for today's installment of our final installment. No, I said installment twice.